Owl House, Gravity Falls, and Amphibia are all amazing shows, and one of the main reasons is because their protagonists are so well written. They're often complex but relatable characters, they're heartwarming, but they still make mistakes, and they feel like real people. Today I'll do my best to rank these protagonists. I'll be ranking Luce from the Owl House, Anne from Amphibia, and Dipper and Mabel from Gravity Falls. I'm doing them together because Dipper and Mabel are inseparable. I'll try my best to rank them as unbiased as possible. I know whoever I choose, there'll be people who are unhappy with my choice. And honestly, that's fair. They're all amazing characters and I love them all equally. I'll be judging our protagonists on this criteria: design, personality, motives, character arcs, actions and impacts, and conclusions. Now, if you've watched my villain rankings, you would know I rated the categories out of 5, but to give me a little more wiggle room for the protagonists, I'll be rating them out of 10 instead. So I'll rank every category and then give an overall total, giving us an overall total out of 60. So let's start with Luce from the Owl House. Design. Luce's Season 1 outfits reflect her more naive, optimistic outlook that she has in Season 1. Just looking at Season 1 Luce, you can tell a lot about her. Based on her expressions and her posture, we can see she radiates energy and wonder. Her eyes are always wide of curiosity. She's eager to explore and learn about this new world she finds herself in. Luce's outfit has this cat hood, which really shows off how innocent she is. It allows her to express a lot to the audience. She can show off her silly nature with it.
I've been waiting to use this. Meow meow.
But it can also be used to show unease. When Luce is afraid, she retreats into this hoodie. It's a very childlike action, so it conveys a lot about her innocent side. This nature is also reflected in her Grom outfit, which is obviously on the more extreme side. It's very outgoing and a bit unorganized, showing us her innocent and free spirit. But as the series progresses, Luce gains more emotional baggage, and this is reflected in her Season 2 design. This design looks more edgy at first glance. Her new color palette is now darker, her purple shirt now hidden by the Grudge Bee jacket. Her overall design looks more mature. She's not the starstruck kid she used to be, but she still has her signature smile. She hasn't lost her childlike wonder yet. But Season 3 Luce design shows her at rock bottom. Long gone is her signature smile. Now her face is always down or tired looking, the weight of her guilt clearly weighing heavy on her heart. Luce has gone full emo mode. Okay, well, that's not true, but her outfit doesn't exactly scream happy. She's wearing tracksuit pants, showing less care. Lining up the three designs, we can really see the shift in her attitude over time. This is excellent storytelling. Without words, we know how Luce is feeling. In Season 3, Luce also wears her Azura cosplay. The very first thing we see in the Owl House is Azura. It sets up Luce's ultimate goal of becoming a witch, so seeing Luce dressed this way shows us she's nearing the end of her arc. The Azura costume also sets up another one of Luce's designs, her Titan form. In Watching and Dreaming, Luce is given the powers of the Titan, turning her into her Titan form. I love this design. Something I find very interesting about this design is that it doesn't use typically good guy traits. It uses dark colors and bones for the bulk of the design, and most striking is the eyes, which are black and yellow, something that would typically appear on a villain's design. I feel it's very fitting for Luce because she's not a typical person. She has lots of weird quirks and has trouble fitting in. I mean, one of her signature phrases is, "Us weirdos gotta stick together," so it's fitting that her powerful Titan form is abnormal and doesn't follow the standard norms of a hero's design. And despite everything I said about the Titan form having evil-looking traits, it doesn't come off that way at all due to Luce's positive traits and charm. Overall, Luce is just really well designed. I love how all of her designs reflect her feelings, and all of these designs come together to give us Luce's flash-forward design. She feels like a combination of all the other Luce designs. She's older and been through so much, so she looks a bit more mature, but she still does retain her goofy abnormal side with things like her daggy pants. The design also includes features like the snake and the necklace, which represent important parts of Luce's life. It feels like an amalgamation of everything she's been through, resulting in our final Luce, our finished Luce. And that's really why she's so well designed. It's all a very visual example of her arc, so I'll give Luce a 7 out of 10 for design. Personality. Luce is an extremely bubbly, high-energy person. Of the characters on this list, Luce was probably the one I liked the fastest. She's a bit too energetic and outgoing for her own good. Her quirky and unique interests and behavior make it hard for Luce to make friends and connect with people in the human realm, but this also gives her a unique outlook that helps her in the demon realm. Since she's struggled and gone through so many hardships, she's a very sympathetic person. When she sees Willow getting bullied, she instantly sympathizes and relates. This makes it easy for Luce to befriend people who are somewhat outcast, people who don't fully fit into the norm. By creating friends this way, she creates true friends, one with genuine relationships. Luce is also extremely selfless. She never wants to see her friends down, so she always puts their needs before her own. This is an extremely noble trait. It's one of the major traits that makes her a hero, but it's also one of her most self-harming traits. She always throws herself into the jaws of danger, always putting herself in harm's way. It makes her reckless. This nature also leads to lots of guilt. She tries to take on the world for her friends, and she can't always win, so she feels responsible for things that are far out of her control. This fear of losing her friends really weighs on her, causing her to be self-destructive. But I'll talk about this in the character arc section. Overall, Luce has the perfect personality for a protagonist. She inspires curiosity and interest in the world around her. She's extremely likable and relatable. She has flaws and problems that again add to her relatability and push the plot forwards. She's also a very complex character. She's not a one-note character who's always upbeat. The Owl House really takes its time exploring Luce's character. I'll give Luce an 8 out of 10 for personality. Motives. Motivation is a key aspect of a protagonist since it drives the story. So what drives Luce? In episode 1, we see Luce is being sent to a summer camp to help her be quote-unquote normal, but she accidentally stumbles into a magical door that takes her to the demon realm. It's a strange and magical place. It's the perfect escape, the perfect place to indulge in her fantasy, a place she might be able to fit in. Luce wants to learn magic and become a good witch. Now that's a pretty basic motivation, but there's actually a lot to it. Her biggest reason to wanting to learn magic is so she can be like her favorite character, Azura the Good Witch. She views Azura as a hero and wants to be like her. But why does she love Azura so much? Because just before her dad passed away, he gave her the Azura novel. So it was there for her when he passed away. It's a connection to him. It's a connection to her father, her hero, to be someone worth looking up to. So overall, Luce's goal really boils down to one of the most basic human desires, to be accepted. Season 2 provides Luce with a new problem and therefore a new motive. Her connection to the human realm has been destroyed. Despite finding a place she belongs, the human realm still has one thing of great importance to her, her mum. Luce obviously loves her mum and wants to reunite with her. She also has a ton of guilt for abandoning her mum, but there's another reason she needs to get back to her, and it's again acceptance. Luce needs her mum to understand and accept her for the way she is. Weirdness and all. Season 3 flips the situation, having Luce trapped in the human realm, and she needs to get back to the demon realm. The Boiling Isles is in catastrophic danger, and Luce needs to save her new home, and her new friends. Luce's motivations are always changing, but revolve around the same core. She wants to be accepted and cared about. She also wants to care for those who she cares about. Her pursuits are extremely noble, so I'll be giving Luce an 8 out of 10 for motivation. Character arcs. Luce's character arc is all over the place, going up and down like a squiggly line. In Season 1, she has a positive arc, as she learns how to make new friends. Season 1 is really about her developing relationships, but Season 2 and 3 takes a different turn. Luce starts to become very guilt-ridden. The two main things that eat at her is first the guilt with her mum. After she destroys the only way to get home and to her mum, she might never see her again. This is the start of Luce's guilt. But it gets times by 10 in the episode Yesterday's Lie, where Luce makes contact with her. Her mum makes her promise to leave the demon realm permanently, and this tears Luce apart. She's torn between her mother and the place she feels truly accepted. Where her friends and newfound family are, the uncertainty of what to do and the guilt of telling them eats away at Luce. The other major thing filling Luce with guilt is Bellos, the big bad. Luce accidentally helps Bellos when she travels back in time. Yeah, it's a long story, let's just not go there. But essentially, she helps Bellos achieve power. Bellos is also the only other human on the Boiling Isles, so every evil deed Bellos does, Luce feels partially responsible for. And Bellos does some pretty horrible deeds. Check out my villain ranking, not gonna lie, pretty sneaky plug. He murders and manipulates and controls the Boiling Isles, and eventually plans to destroy everyone who lives on it. All of this weighs on Luce's heart. especially after Kingstide. In Kingstide, Belos's plan falls into place. Our heroes are able to stop it, but at a terrible cost. They unleash the Collector, a creature of unknown power to our heroes. They are then trapped in the human realm. They have no idea what they've done. Did anyone on the Boiling Isles survive? Did they unleash something worse? Are their friends and family safe? All of this uncertainty and guilt crushes down on Luce, because it's not just her, it's her friends. They've lost their home. Luce takes on all of the responsibility by herself, and we see the results in Season 3 Luce. This is Luce at her lowest. This is the peak of her negative arc. We have seen the weight of her guilt chip away at her, till now she's a guilt-driven hollow shell of her former self. The thing I appreciate about this negative arc is how slow it is. It's rare to see cartoons cover these more complex negative emotions to this extent, and to take our main characters to these dark places. But it would be a tragedy to leave Luce in this state, so obviously Luce returns to a more positive arc. In Season 3, Episode 2, we see probably the biggest revelation in Luce's arc. Luce is angry that she's messed up again. Her and her mum have a heart-to-heart, where her mum recounts some of her biggest failures, but the one that bothers her the most is how she tried to handle Luce. She wanted to protect her from bullying by making her fit in to more traditional norms, by changing her into something she's not. Camilla expressing this deep insight helps Luce understand what she's really wanted.
Was to be understood.
To be understood. I talked about it in her character motivation, that she wanted to be accepted. Being understood is a key aspect of being accepted. In the human world, Luce was bullied and felt like an outsider because she acted weird, but when she found the demon realm, she not only found a special place lined up with her interests, but she found true friends here. Friends she could act the way she wanted to around. People she didn't need to change for. You can have lots of people who are all your friends, but if you can't be yourself around them, if you have to put on an act for them, they're probably fake friends. It's a relationship that will never stand the test of time, but the connections that Luce makes here are true, because they understand her. A big part of Luce's worries and mounting pressure and guilt comes from the fact she is afraid of how her friends will perceive her. She worries that her connections to Belos and his plans will destroy her friendship. It comes from the fear that they won't understand the situation or her, they'll see her in a different light, and she'll be left alone again, with no one who truly understands her. This is shown in the very beginning of Watching and Dreaming. Luce is trapped in a bad dream, where her worst fears are true. Her friends have turned on her and despise her, but because Luce has such a deep understanding of her friends, she can see through the trap. At this point she can move past this fear because of her friends and family. They have proven that they understand her, and her vice versa. Luce has a beautiful character arc. It's just so deep and simple at the same time. It explores many of her internal fears that many of us have. Life isn't like movies or shows. It's not always clear what a person's going through. For many of us, it's not always a clear upwards progression we go through. For many of us, we get worse before we get better. We let our anxieties take control. Luce's arc really reflects all this. It's a very real and human arc. I'll be giving Luce a 9 out of 10 for her character arc. Actions and impacts. Now, I'm not going to list all of Luce's actions here, or we'd be here all day. So, I'll just cover some important ones. One of Luce's biggest decisions is to stay in the Boiling Isles in the first place. At first, she is pressured into helping Ida and King get King's crown back, but later during a prison fight, Luce is given a chance to escape. But instead she goes back and helps the prisoners escape. The prisoners were arrested for unjust reasons, for being themselves. Luce helps encourage them. This first choice helps her to make the decision to stay in the Boiling Isles. It helps show her it's a place she could fit in, that there are other people like her. It also helps convince Ida and King that she should stay. The prison escape moment is the first of many selfless acts Luce would make. Luce is always putting herself at risk to help others. For example, when she first meets Willow and pretends to be Willow's abomination project, entering Willow's mind to help reverse her memory wipe, taking Amity's place to fight Grom, helping Amity's mum test an abomination so her friends can go back to school after being expelled. And the list just goes on and on. Luce is creating a place that she fits in. She's creating true friends. Now, following this trend of Luce putting others' needs ahead of her own safety is the final of Season 1. This is the next major action I want to talk about. Ida's curse is getting worse, and Luce can't let that happen. On a school trip to the Emperor's castle, Luce attempts to steal the healing hat, but this time she's gone too far. She gets herself captured. This forces Ida to come and save her. This results in a spectacular battle that breaks Ida's magic, allowing her curse to consume her. She is then taken to be petrified, frozen as solid stone. This action, while good-hearted, cost her greatly. It's the pinnacle of a lot of Luce's choices. This action, while good-hearted, she wants to help others and puts herself in danger, resulting in her biggest loss. This situation would force Luce to make the hardest choice she would have to face in the show. Luce confronts Emperor Belos. Belos gives Luce a choice of saving Ida, but handing over the portal to the human realm. Luce, using some quick thinking, gives Belos the portal and leaves to go save Ida, but she rigs the portal to explode. With one quick choice, Luce has chosen to save her newfound family, but abandon her world, and more importantly, her mother. This choice impacts the whole show. It starts Luce's character arc in a more negative direction. It also changes Luce's motivation, changing her motivation from learning to be a witch to focusing on getting home to her mother. The choice also gives us a look into Luce. We see how much she is willing to sacrifice. She believes Belos wants to do harm to the human realm, so she would rather destroy any hope of getting home than let her home world be destroyed. Showing Luce is willing to make any sacrifice to help her people, which is made certain by another one of Luce's big actions. In the final episode of The Owl House, Luce makes the ultimate sacrifice. It's not even really a choice, it's a reflex. Belos' monstrous form is about to destroy the Collector. Without thought, Luce swoops in and saves the Collector from certain death, but gets hit in the process, and Luce dies. Bum bum bum! Well, sort of. She comes back to life, but that doesn't take away from the fact that she was willing to try and save anyone even at the expense of her own life. This is the choice a lot of her other decisions have been leading up to. All of her choices have shown her to put others ahead of herself, and this is the most extreme version of that decision. This choice ultimately allows Luce to save the Boiling Isles. Without this sacrifice, she never would have gotten her Titan powers, and never could have defeated Belos. Luce's decisions that she makes throughout the show are very intense, and truly push her to her limits. Her actions rippling through every part of the show, even smaller things like going back in time to find out about the portal, have drastic consequences for the show. Each action and decision has a lot of weight behind it, so I'll give Luce a 7 out of 10 for actions and impacts. Ending. We've talked about character arcs, progressions, and struggles, but is it all wrapped up in a nice neat bow? After Belos is defeated, separated from the Titan, all that's left is a weak, pathetic man groveling for his life. First he tries to fool Luce by claiming he's cursed, but Luce sees through him. He then lashes out, claiming she'll be as bad and evil, cunning and unforgiving, saying that she's human and they are supposed to be better than this. While this is not his intent, this is some of the things Luce feared her friends would see her as. Since Belos was human, and she unintentionally helped him, she worried her friends would look down on her in disgust. But Luce is above that now. She knows that her friends have her back, and she's letting go of those fears. And now she looks down on them, figuratively and literally, as she watches Belos, silently not saying a word to him. He's beyond forgiveness. The acid rain, with a little extra help from her friends, take care of Belos. It's finally over. Peace is restored. After our heroes get a breather, we see them reunite with their friends and family. Luce takes a moment to reflect. She realizes that now the Titan's soul has passed on, so has the power of the glyphs. A chapter of her life is over. This ending really does a great job at showing us that while it's not over for our characters, this chapter of their life is. They still have lots to work on, but they've grown and changed, and they're entering a new chapter of their life. One of growth and rebuilding, a much brighter future. We then get a really beautiful time jump montage showing the Boiling Isles healing, showing where all our characters are, how their lives have evolved and progressed and improved. After all of this, we get to see Luce is getting a surprise party. Everyone wants to celebrate everything she's done and sacrificed for them, showing her how much they love and appreciate her. It's a really nice and optimistic ending, showing lots of hope for the future. The show could have easily ended on a more dramatic note. Luce could have been separated from the Boiling Isles, but that wouldn't have felt right. Luce has made the Boiling Isles her home. This ending feels really complete, but it also leaves a lot of room for revisiting the show if they ever need. It's just a really heartwarming ending. It's also impressive that so much was wrapped up in such a small amount of time. Since the show was cut early, it could have really fumbled the ending. But Luce's story feels very neatly wrapped up. I'll be giving the Owl House's ending a 7 out of 10. It's just so good. But I do think some of the other shows on this list were given a better shot at sticking the landing. This overall means Luce's total score is 46 out of 60. Despite just writing a 20-minute long video essay, I still don't know if it's enough to express the magic of Luce's character. She's just so likable. But can our next protagonist capture the same magic? Let's talk about Anne Boonchoy from Amphibia. Anne has a lot of similarities to Luce in terms of her situation and plot points. But is that all they share? Let's start with design. Anne is dressed as a typical schoolgirl, although her outfit has taken a massive toll due to her circumstances. Getting trapped in Amphibia's harsh swamp environment has left Anne a bit of a mess, giving her the iconic look. Two of her most iconic traits is her missing right shoe and the twigs and sticks in her hair. They really paint the picture of her being out of her depth. She doesn't really know what she's doing, and we can instantly see that from her design. One of my favorite things about Anne is how expressive her face is. The animators really seem to love to make funny, goofy, and over-the-top expressions. Anne keeps this outfit all the way up to Season 2, Episode 18, minus random outfit changes in specific episodes of course. But other than a few exceptions, she stays the same up till Episode 18 of Season 2. In this episode, Anne is being pressured into getting an upgrade to get some armor for adventuring. Anne tries on all sorts of crazy over-the-top pieces of armor, but Anne finally settles on this small chest plate. I could describe why I like this design, but I think Anne will put it better than I ever could.
I think the reason I don't want a new look is because I'm finally happy with who I see in the mirror right now. So whatever I put on, I just want to be able to see the same me looking back.
I like that this small upgrade to Anne's wardrobe has so much meaning to her. Anne's next major design change comes with her new powers in true colors. Now, obviously, massive spoiler warning, Anne connects with the blue gem on the Calamity box, giving her basically anime powers. Just kidding, but the design is very reminiscent of anime, such as Naruto, I think. I don't really watch any anime, so if I got that wrong, my bad. The main obvious change is her hair, which turns a glowing blue and sticks up. Her eyes are glowing a fiery blue as well, and in general she just glows, and has a fiery blue energy around her. My favorite part of the design is how it incorporates the twigs and leaves in Anne's hair. The twigs grow out, connecting with her. I see this as a representation of how Anne has literally become connected with the land of Amphibia. The design after this is my least favorite. After returning to Earth, she finally gets to put on some de-swampified clothes. I think this design is a little boring. Nothing in particular stands out to me. It is very fitting to her new environment, but I'm not really sad to see it go in the later half of the season, when she returns to Amphibia. Getting closer to the end, we have Anne's power form. It has all the features of the older power form, but this time it comes with some fancy armor and a cape. This does feel like her ultimate form. It feels very anime to me. I personally like Anne's first power form over this one. Her first one feels more raw. In the moment where she first unleashes her powers, it's due to her intense anger and grief and sadness. It's just a burst of emotion, and the fact that it only changes Anne and not her outfit makes it feel more of an extension of that feeling. This second one just feels a little too fancy for my liking. It doesn't show us the true Anne beneath. It goes against what her second design stood for, the minimalistic approach. But honestly, I'm probably just overthinking this. Very shortly after entering her second power form, Anne takes on the responsibility of all 3 Calamity Stones. And well, for one, it creates a very striking design. When the power of the stones are split between the 3 girls, we get very colourful over-the-top designs. But in contrast, all of the powers combined turns Anne pale white with a hint of a blue glow. Her eyes turn to blue sparkles, and most importantly, cracks appear along her skin. The overwhelming power can't be contained by one person for long. This design screams overwhelming power in its purest form. It gives Anne a distinct distant alien look, but it's also a very familiar design. Gone is the fancy armor, and back is the classic Anne, one shoe and all. This design really works for me. And finally, with our very last Anne design, we get the time skip Anne. We see Anne all grown up, and suited up for her new job as a herpetologist, aka as the kids put it, a frog lady. It shows how far Anne has come since Season 1. It shows her change and growth. Everything about this is satisfying. It's great to see Anne find a job she loves, and one that connects to her past, but also paves a bright future. Wow, that was a lot of designs, but all of them reflect Anne's growth and development. I like that all of them still stick with her core design and build on it. Comparing Anne's power-up design to Luce's power-up design, I think I like Anne's more. It feels more connected to her, in that it uses a lot of Anne's base design, while Luce's adds a lot of new stuff and changes a lot. Anne's changes are more subtle. Her designs always make sure to show our start Anne underneath, so we can see she's more confident with who she is. So I'll be giving Anne a score of 8 out of 10 for design. Just a little bit above Luce. Personality. Unlike Luce, I wasn't instantly on board with Anne. Luce's personality instantly had me hooked, but Anne's made me a little skeptical. This wouldn't last long, of course, but my first impressions were skeptical. Anne starts off as a somewhat selfish, pushy person, but she also has plenty of moments of being very selfless, like when she first meets Sprig and saves him. But for the first half of Season 1, Anne comes off as a bit rough around the edges. In episode 1b, she presses Sprig into doing what she wants, despite the fact he really doesn't want to. This worried me at first. I was worried that this bossy, mean girl attitude would stick, but it doesn't take long to see Anne's true colours. To quote Anne's voice actor's description of her, she is fierce and independent. She is extremely caring, especially for her froggy family and friends. Anne's also a good mix of goofy and cool. She definitely is a bit nerdy, but nowhere near on the level of Luce. She's also very athletic and energetic. Like all of us, Anne is flawed. She can be very irresponsible, and selfish, and even a bit lazy, but she grows as a person during the show, which we will dive more into in the character arc section. But Anne grows a lot, showing us her loyalty and bravery throughout the show. Anne's development made her one of my favourite protagonists. She becomes so likeable. Like many of us, there's a lot to Anne. Getting to see her hobbies and her interests and even exploring her Thai background really makes her feel like a rounded out character. By the end of it, I couldn't get enough of Sprig and Anne's relationship. I'll give Anne a 7 out of 10 for personality. Motives. Anne's motives are pretty straightforward. She wants to find her friends and escape Amphibia. Pretty straightforward, right? Wrong! This is made infinitely more complicated by Anne's friends, who have other plans. While Anne's goal of getting back home with her friends never changes, her need to protect Amphibia overrules it. Anne ends up in a similar situation to Luce, getting trapped back on Earth. Ironically, after spending so much of her time trying to get back to Earth, Anne's new motivation of saving Amphibia becomes her new motive for Season 3. That, and more specifically, saving Marcy. Anne's motives are straightforward and easy to understand. It's also nice to see Anne's drive to protect her newfound family and home increase and become more of the main focus as the show progresses. One of the most interesting part of Anne's goals is her relationship with her friends. She wants them all to be safe, but that's easier said than done, considering for most of the show, Sasha is more of a villain than Anne's friend. But I'll talk about that more in the next section, character arcs. So I'll give Anne a 7 out of 10 for motivation. Character arcs. There is a very big difference between early Season 1 Anne and the final episode Anne. Anne starts off as a fairly self-centered person. Over the course of the first half of Season 1, we get plenty of examples of this. In episode 1b, Anne peer pressures Sprig into stealing Hop Pop's key so they can go to the lake. She also ignores a safety sign for the sake of her desires, completely disregarding her safety, but also neglecting Sprig's safety. In episode 2, she breaks Hop Pop's special cane. When Anne unexpectedly gets fame due to her pimples, she neglects the planters. She also carelessly spends Hop Pop's money on a girls' day out, leaving them in huge debt. She also fakes being sick to get out of work, causing the others to actually get sick. So yeah, you get the point, there's plenty of examples. She has a lot of flaws. In episode 1a though, we do get an interesting look into Anne's psychology. It becomes clear that Anne has a very warped sense of friendship.
Ugh, I thought you were trying to be my friend.
I am!
Well, this is what friends do, remember? They help each other get the things they want. If a friend likes a pencil case, you get it for them. And if a friend wants you to steal a crazy music box from a thrift store, even if you really don't want to, you do it, okay? Because if you don't, they might not want to be your friend anymore.
Anne's friend Sasha is a control freak, and has given Anne a warped perception of friendship. Anne just follows everything Sasha does, and doesn't stand up for herself. We see this directly in flashbacks. When Sasha gets mad, Anne just crumbles to her will. As kids, Anne and Marcy were bullied, but Sasha stands up for them, so Anne and Marcy naturally trust Sasha, and look up to her. In high school, Sasha is perceived as a cool kid, so this keeps the perception that Sasha is a role model to be followed, respected and copied. Despite the reckless self-interested nature of Sasha, it's clear that Anne isn't a bad person. In the first episode, Anne goes back to save Sprig, despite the risks, and Anne does show remorse for her bad actions. Clearly Anne wants to be accepted by the planters because she cares about them. She's a good person who's just been influenced down the wrong path, but luckily the planters in Wartwood can help her. It's clear as the show progresses, we see Anne becoming less selfish, and even standing up for those she cares about. One of the biggest turning points is Toad Tax. Anne joins a bunch of toads who are there to collect taxes, but she starts to see the injustice happening here. She slowly sneakily returns people's precious belongings. And finally, when she fully understands how wrong the situation is, she puts her foot down. Despite Wartwood's people acting somewhat cold to Anne, she stands up for what she knows is right.
Wow, you've gone from town beast to town protector. Big fan of that narrative.
This starts a dangerous fight, where Anne stands her ground, but gets her arm hurt. But Anne wins over the town's trust, finally being fully accepted into the town. Anne starts to show us how brave she can be, and how she won't just sit by and watch people get pushed around. But this is only a warm-up for what's to come. Over the rest of the season, Anne does a lot of good, and has a lot of growth. She takes on responsibility in episode 14, Snow Day, where she has to keep watch over the town. She learns not to judge people on surface appearances, when she teams up with the town weirdo to basically find the Amphibia equivalent of Bigfoot. She also becomes more of a team player when she helps out Wartwood in a bug ball game. She just generally gets closer to her froggy family. All of this development is put to the ultimate test in the final episode of Season 1, Reunion. Anne is finally reunited with Sasha. There's only one catch. She's now one of the leaders of the Toads. Sasha and the Toads lead the frogs into a trap intending to execute Hop Pop. Anne has to choose between her froggy family or her friends. Now, while this seems like an easy choice, of course Anne will pick her newfound family, it still must have been incredibly difficult. Anne has been practically shaped by Sasha. Sasha has been her role model and to an extent her protector, keeping bullies away. Having such a high view of someone makes it hard to question them, so Anne normally doesn't, even if she knows she's wrong. She's basically been conditioned to follow Sasha. As I said, this really shows in the earlier episodes of the show. Sasha manipulates and pressures Anne into standing down.
Then put your sword down now. End of discussion.
There we go. That's my girl.
Anne starts to fall for it, her bravery being extinguished by Sasha's grip on her. But Sprig demonstrates what true friendship is, snapping Anne out of it, and giving her the strength to fight back. This is Anne's biggest turning point. She finally overcomes her past, ready to let it go, literally. Anne's shown she will stand up for her friends. Sprig puts it best.
She's brave, she's smart, and most of all, she's not gonna be pushed around by a bully like you!
Anne and Sasha are separated again, in a heartbreaking scene. Season 2 has Anne putting her development from Season 1 to the test. She trusts in her froggy family more. When Anne reunites with Marcy, she has to learn to trust Marcy more as well. Marcy is a very danger-prone person, so Anne has to trust in Marcy since she's learned and changed a lot in Amphibia as well. Anne's next major test is forgiveness. She discovers Hop Pop hid the music box, Anne's only way home. He did this to protect his family. Anne understands but struggles to forgive Hop Pop, and it takes time before she eventually does. Not long after this, we have the previously mentioned episode where we have Anne express how she's finally happy with the person she sees now. Anne is starting to feel complete. And all of this comes together and is expressed in the Season 2 finale, True Colors. I'll talk about this episode in the action section, but long story short, there is a lot of reveals and betrayal, but Anne shows us her true colors in a different way. We see the Anne she's been changing into, a protective, brave, strong Anne. Season 3 mostly spends a lot of its time showing us the change she went through. It compares the old Anne to the new. Anne's parents comment on how she's become far more responsible.
Unbelievable. She's like a different person.
Maybe Oprah was right. She has come a long way.
Overall, Season 3 shows off a lot of Anne's positive traits, whether it's being a uniting force for Amphibia, or knowing when she's out of her depth and allowing others to help. Amphibia's final 2 episodes do the best at showing her change. Before the events of Amphibia, Anne has a talk with her teacher. She sees that Anne's a good kid, she's just misguided, so she wants Anne to reflect on who she is. At the beginning of the show, Anne is lost literally and metaphorically. She only followed Sasha, she never did things for herself.
Before I ended up in Amphibia, I didn't care about right or wrong. I just did what was easy. I let people walk all over me. And I think that's because I didn't love myself. Not really. But meeting you three has changed all of that. And these months we've spent together have shown me the person I really want to be. Trap or not, I have to do this.
Anne has discovered so much about herself and found so much purpose, and that all comes together in the hardest thing. The hardest thing tests Anne in the most extreme way possible. Anne has to sacrifice herself to save the world she loves. There's no hesitation. She could take her friends and go home, but internally there is no choice. She would never abandon Amphibia. This is such an extreme contrast between the Anne in the beginning. She was very self-centered, while here she is willing to give herself up for her friends. I'll talk more about the sacrifice later in actions, but this sacrifice results in another choice. Anne meets the Freestone deity. Yeah, it's a long story. The Freestone deity is the creator of the Calamity Stones. She offers Anne her job as guardian of the multiverse, and again, Anne shows how much she's matured by turning it down.
No one's perfect. My time in Amphibia taught me that we're all changing and improving and learning as we go. Every time I hit an obstacle, I found a way to overcome it.
It shows a deep understanding of herself, choosing instead to keep growing as a person, because no matter how far we go, we can always improve. Wow, that was a lot of talking. So time to actually rate her arc after all that. It's not quite as unique as Luce's character arc. Anne definitely has a more traditional hero's journey, but it's just so well done. It feels so rewarding seeing Anne become a better person. I think they really took a risk making Anne have such obvious flaws at the beginning, but we are really rewarded for seeing her overcome them. It's just so good, so I'll be giving Anne an 8.5 out of 10 for character arc. Actions and impacts. So I've already covered a lot of Anne's actions in the character arc section, so I'll try to be briefer in certain parts. So let's go over the highlights. Her first big action is stealing the music box, obviously. This action gets her and her friends trapped in Amphibia to begin with. Now yes, there's a lot of different angles to this. Marcy had knowledge of what the music box was going to do, and yes, Sasha peer pressured Anne into stealing it, but at the end of the day, it was still Anne's decision to listen to them, despite knowing it was wrong. This decision is important not only for the fact that it traps Anne in Amphibia, which kicks off the show, but it also highlights Anne's flaws for later development. Anne's next action is a far more positive one. When she first encounters Sprig, he is hunting for a beast, which is of course Anne. Sprig gets caught in Anne's trap, but suddenly a huge mantis beast attacks. In fear, Anne goes to run away, but stops, realizing she can't just leave Sprig behind, choosing to save him. If Anne hadn't saved Sprig, she never would have won over Hot Pop's trust, and she would have been run out of town. So, the show would have been very different if Anne hadn't saved Sprig. Anne probably would have died in the valley. Skipping much further ahead to episode 9, the episode focuses on Anne helping out a local restaurant from an annoying food critic. This isn't a particularly noteworthy action, it doesn't really push the overarching plot forward or even have much overall effect on the world. But to me, it's a big moment of Anne stepping up and helping the town. She's so hardworking and determined in this episode. Overall, I think it's just an important moment for her and her connection to Wartwood. Then we of course have the tax collection episode, which I already talked about. It is definitely the biggest turning point in how Wartwood sees Anne. This is the episode she is finally accepted into the town. This newfound respect between the town and Anne is demonstrated in episode 14, Snow Day, where Anne is put in charge of protecting the frozen frogs of Wartwood. Anne is pretty irresponsible in this episode, but she makes things right and owns up her mistakes, so still a win in my books. Again, we already covered this, but Anne defends the Wartwood citizens from Sasha and the Toads. It's one of the most intense moments in the show. It's just a brilliant moment all round. But this moment is somehow topped by true colours. Anne and her friends have to stop Sasha, who's trying to overthrow Utopia, and defeat Sasha, learning from her last battle with her. Sasha unfortunately finds out some important information about King Andreas. He's not the nice guy he seems to be. Anne obviously doesn't believe her, choosing to give the Calamity Box to King Andreas. So Anne's already been through a lot in this episode, but it gets crazier. I've actually talked extensively about this scene in my top 10 most impactful animated moments video, so I'll be brief here. Also check out the video, that'd be doing me a real big favor guys, thanks. This next bit is just crazy though. Andreas reveals his true colours as a villain, and a battle starts, but it's brought to a stalemate by Andreas threatening to drop Sprig to his death. Despite our heroes giving in, Andreas goes against his word and drops Sprig, causing Anne to reveal her hidden power from the Calamity Stones. She lashes out in anger, using her power. It's honestly an amazing battle, but the new power ends up draining Anne before she can finish Andreas off, ending with Anne and the planters stuck on Earth. Over multiple episodes, Anne works on controlling her power, but to escape Earth and get back to Amphibia, Anne has to do one of her most wild actions yet. Well, probably not yet. She's already done some pretty wild stuff. She has to take on the FBI, and it's awesome. I love this bit. There's literally a Star Wars Darth Vader scene.
Hey, that kid escaped! Get her!
Damn, that's just so badass. The end of this encounter ends with Anne using her powers to open a portal. Anne then spends the second half of Season 3 helping the Resistance. She recruits new members and helps take down threats. In episode 16, Anne uses her powers to unite the three armies. Without Anne, the Resistance would have been crushed by King Andrius and the Corps. Anne leads an assault on King Andrius' flying fortress, but is captured and taken to Earth, as Andrius and his robo-army invades. This results in one of Anne's most difficult battles, Anne versus Andrius. Anne has a long drawn-out battle that she gets very close to losing multiple times. Time and time again, Anne is forced to fight. She definitely goes through the most fights compared to Luce and the Mystery Twins. She also does a lot on a much grander scale, helping lead armies and fight very publicly, especially Andrius' fight. And of course, we have the final fight with the Corps. It's an impressive fight, lots of action. This fight doesn't seem as much of a struggle, but the battle isn't the hardest thing, it's the choice. Like Luce, Anne chooses to sacrifice herself. And like Luce, she also gets the Uno reverse card on death, and comes back to life. This is obviously her most noble action, without question. Overall, Anne has a lot of heroic deeds. She doesn't have as many smaller personal impacts on individuals like Luce. Luce seems to connect to a lot more people on a lot more personal level, helping out individuals. It's not that Anne doesn't do this, she just has a lot more focus on her personal development, and she seems to do things that help the greater good, like standing up for Wartwood. Overall, I'm going to give Anne an 8 out of 10 for actions and impacts. Ending. Does Anne have a satisfying conclusion? Well, let's find out. Anne takes the power of the Calamity Gems, but before she can unleash her power on the Corps, Sprig comes begging Anne to stop. It's so heartbreaking.
Please don't do this! Don't go! I don't know what I'll do without you! You're my everything! You changed my life!
And you've changed mine.
Emotional damage!
Even though I know they'll be fine, Sprig's performance just tugs at my heartstrings every time. Sprig lets Anne go, and she does what she has to, and unleashes her power on the Corps' moon form, but the power of the Calamity Stones takes its toll on Anne. Sprig brings Anne back to Amphibia, where we get the most emotional moment. Anne's about to pass away. Everyone's reaction is just devastating. When Luce passes away in Watching and Dreaming, we get a very different response from King and Ida. They are obviously devastated, but they are also enraged and lash out at Bellos. But here, the threat's over. There's no one to lash out at. There's just this moment. Everyone's shocked and heartbroken. Again, showing how far Anne's come in her final moments, she tries to alleviate some of the sadness by telling a joke. Even as she's dying, she's thinking of others. And then she's gone, getting literally Thanos-snapped.
Mr. Sprig, I don't feel
So good!
Anne wakes up in a strange place, where she meets the Cosmic Guardian. It's honestly just a crazy moment that dumps a lot of lore on us, and it has a cute cat. To me, this isn't quite as interesting as Luce meeting the Titan. The Titan is pretty well established and has more connections to our characters. The Guardian offers Anne its job, and as previously mentioned, Anne turns it down, saying she still has lots to learn. It's the pinnacle of her development, showing just how mature and self-aware she's become. The Guardian likes the idea that Anne could keep improving, so he basically just respawns her. And Anne gets to reunite with her friends, but now it's time for what truly is the hardest thing: saying goodbye. I can't really say that too many shows or movies have affected me enough to make my eyes water and nearly cry. You heard that nearly, didn't actually happen. But man, Amphibia's goodbye scene, oh my god, it really hits me in the feels. It's just so heartbreaking. The girls only have the power to make one more portal home, so they'll never be able to return to Amphibia. First, Marcy says goodbye to Lady Olivia and General Yunan, and of course King Andrius. I don't have too much to say on this goodbye. It is nice seeing Marcy acknowledging Andrius having regret for what he's done. Then we have Sasha and Grimes' goodbye. Damn, this one is funny, and also extremely wholesome.
Was an honor serving with you.
I'm gonna miss you so much!
Not as much as I'm gonna miss you.
But of course, the main event is Anne and the Planters' goodbye. It's just so heartbreaking, especially Sprig's reaction. The animators went all out on this. Sprig is not coping well with Anne leaving, and it just shows. In every aspect of his body language, just look at that face. He is so devastated. And Sprig scrunching up his favorite hat is a great touch. But yeah, this is the bit that gets me. Once they've said their goodbyes, it's time to leave. Anne goes to leave, but Sprig grabs her, and they have one final hug with this amazing circling shot. It's really beautiful, but then they have to let go, and it's over. Much like Owl House, we get a montage showing Amphibia healing, and showing us where everyone's at. We see that Sprig still holds Anne deeply in his heart. Anne's old room has basically become Sprig's study. It's basically a monument to their adventures and to Anne. Waltwood is unveiling a statue of Anne to celebrate everything she did for the town. Ivy comes up to Sprig, letting him know that Grime has discovered a new continent that they need to explore. Sprig looks up at the statue of Anne and smiles, knowing Anne would want him to continue his adventures. We then get to cut to 10 years later on Earth, where we see what's happened to the girls. The girls kind of grew apart, and pursued different things in life, but they are reuniting for Anne's birthday. Anne starts her career as a herpetologist, working with frogs at the aquarium. Like Sprig, Anne never forgets her friends, but she doesn't just spend her time pining for the past. Like Sprig, she has her own adventures ahead of her, and she's made something of herself. She starts off very lost, but has found what she loves. The show ends with Anne reuniting with her friends, which was always her goal through the show, but this time, her friends are more true. There's a lot to unpack here. I think the message is really important. I think Anne puts it best.
It can be the hardest thing to realize you can't hold on to something forever. Sometimes, you have to let it go. But of the things you let go, you'd be surprised what makes its way back to you.
I think this message is so important because obviously we all go through change, but I want to talk more specifically how it applies to our friendships, because people come and go in your life. I personally have had friends who I've been close to who have gone down different paths in life, but just because they might not be with you now, or you've drifted apart, doesn't mean that they're not important to you still. Things are always changing, but the times you went through with your friends will always be with you forever. This ending is just so beautiful. It's just an emotional roller coaster. Unlike Owl House, Amphibia was allowed to tell its full story, so everything feels really well paced. The hardest thing is basically about the goodbyes and concluding Anne's arc. It had the previous episode to deal with most of the bad guys. Because of this, there's not as much to wrap up in the end, so they have time to cover everything they need to. This ending has some of the most powerful character moments that I've seen in a long time, and I'm personally kind of a sucker for bittersweet endings. While yes, it's a happy ending, Amphibia is saved, Anne is resurrected, there's still that part that's left to be desired. We want Anne and Sprig to still be together, so them being separated leaves the audience with something that's not fully satisfying. It's not fully perfect, so it sticks in our minds, and leaves fans with something to want, allowing people's imaginations and love for the show to go wild. The sadness sticks with us longer than a perfect ending. I'll give Anne's ending a 9 out of 10. So that's it for Anne. I probably waffled on way too long. I don't even want to know what the video length time is at this point. But there's just so much to love about this character, because they're written just so well. Sprig and Anne's friendship will stick with me for a very long time. So what's Anne's final score? Anne scored a 47.5 out of 60. But enough about Anne. Let's move on to Gravity Falls' Pine Twins. So, I'll be doing Dipper and Mabel together because they both share the spotlight. Dipper and Mabel's situation is a lot more chill compared to Anne and Luce's. Their parents have sent them to stay with their great uncle Stan over the summer holidays. But the town of Gravity Falls isn't everything that it seems. So first, let's start with their design. Dipper is pretty straightforward. He basically remains the same throughout the whole show. No major outfit changes, no time skips, nothing. He has the pretty standard trope of the cartoon character always wearing the same outfit. Dipper's hat is definitely the most iconic part of his design. And the symbol even has law. The wrinkle under Dipper's eye makes him seem more nervous and uncertain, and his general posture gives him a bit of an awkward look. But let's move on to Mabel because there's far more to talk about. In fact, I'm just going to get to the point. While Dipper has one outfit, Mabel has many. She's constantly changing sweaters. In fact, according to this website I found, she has 107 sweaters. 107! That's insane! That is so much extra effort. I love it so much. It's such a reflection of Mabel's energetic and outgoing personality. It's also just fun seeing all the completely random stuff she has, like why does she have a floppy disk sweater? While Dipper and Mabel's designs don't have as much emotional meaning as Luce and Anne's, I still need to give it a high score for the absolute number of fun, energetic outfits Mabel has alone. So I'll give them a 9 for design. Personality. Dipper and Mabel have somewhat opposite personalities. Dipper is the smart one, but he is also awkward and nervous. His nerves more apply to social situations because Dipper is actually very brave when it comes to adventures. Dipper is also very compassionate, often putting his sister above his needs. While Mabel is a high-energy, outgoing person, she's very silly and doesn't overthink and get stuck in her own head like Dipper does. Like Dipper, Mabel is very brave, but not just when facing threats, but also in social situations. She has a lot of charm, but on the negative side, she can be very sensitive and not always the most reliable. Dipper and Mabel are like two pieces of the puzzle, they complete each other. They both help fill each other's flaws. They have a very close sibling relationship. Their bond and trust that they share helps them get through a lot. They both have each other's backs. Overall, the Pines twins dynamic is great. They're the perfect mix of teamwork and trouble. Since they have such opposite traits, of course they will sometimes clash, but don't all siblings? It makes for lots of fun adventures. So I'll give Dipper and Mabel a 9 out of 10 for personality. Motives. What drives the mystery twins? Well, mysteries of course. Dipper and Mabel are sent to their great Uncle Stan's tourist trap, called the Mystery Shack, to stay for the summer. The town of Gravity Falls isn't everything that it appears to be. While Dipper is in the woods, he stumbles across a mysterious compartment, revealing an even more mysterious book. It's a cryptic journal documenting all the strange and bizarre occurrences around Gravity Falls. The journal provides the baseline mystery that motivates our characters. For most of Season 1, there isn't a lot of major motives. The Pines family is just going about their lives, but the general weirdness of the town provides us with plenty of adventures. Dipper is mostly driven by general curiosity around the supernatural events in Gravity Falls, while what drives Mabel is very different. She is extremely spontaneous and is mostly motivated by just doing things she enjoys. She's also very boy crazy, willing to do a lot for a summer romance. During all this, there is the constant overall mystery of who is the author of the journal, but this would become a much bigger motivation in Season 2. The journal would push the bigger plot points forward. This grand mystery would lead us to a much larger threat, the threat of Bill's cipher. The second half of Season 2 is spent preparing and trying to stop Bill. Bill has been plotting to break into our dimension and reshape it to his own will, and the Pines family can't let that happen. These motives aren't on the surface as pressing or dramatic as Luce and Anne's, well, the Bill thing is, but they do have something that Owl House and Amphibia don't. The ongoing mystery that Gravity Falls offers Dipper and Mabel is also offered to the audience as well. Hidden all throughout the show are secret codes, messages, and ciphers for the audience to engage in. This gets the audience extremely engaged and invested in the characters' motivations because we share the same goal. This is such a creative way of getting us invested in the motives, so I'll give Dipper and Mabel an 8 out of 10 for their creative motivations. Character arcs. A lot of the character arc is focused on Dipper. Dipper is a genius and he is ambitious. Dipper wants to do great things. He wants to get on with his life and grow up. If Dipper keeps thinking this way, he'll miss his childhood. We can see this in some of the earlier episodes. In episode 2, Dipper wants to get a photo of the Gobblewonker. If he can make this discovery, he thinks he'll be able to become famous and respected. Then later in episode 6, we see Dipper literally trying to become a manly man, training with the Manitors. This part of Dipper's arc comes into full swing when Ford is introduced into the mix. Dipper and Ford are a lot alike. Ford, impressed by Dipper's skill and knowledge, offers Dipper an opportunity to become his apprentice. Dipper would be able to stay in Gravity Falls and skip high school altogether.
Have you thought much about your future?
No, not really. I mean, beyond graduating high school with a high GPA so I can get accepted to a good technical college with a photography and media production minor to start my own ghost hunting show.
Ha ha ha! It's like talking to a younger version of myself.
Dipper knows exactly what he wants in life, and now he has a chance to take it. But at what cost? Dipper would be rushing straight into adulthood, missing out on the opportunity to have a normal childhood, and it would affect Mabel as well. Speaking of Mabel, let's talk about her. Mabel definitely has far less of an arc compared to Dipper. She can be very self-centered, which can lead to her unintentionally disregarding others' needs, but on average, she's pretty good. A lot of her arc ties into Dipper's, whether it's her trying to help Dipper with his confidence problems, or if it's just them bonding as siblings. Like all siblings, Dipper and Mabel bicker and fight sometimes, but they always resolve it, and they grow closer together for it. Dipper and Mabel started the series very close together, but it only grows stronger over their time in Gravity Falls. But their bond is put to the ultimate test when Dipper is offered the apprenticeship. Mabel, realizing that Dipper may not return home with her, breaks her, causing her to run away and unintentionally unleashing the apocalypse. Yeah, a lot happens, But very long story short, Mabel gets put into a fantasy world where she can avoid having to grow up. She parallels Dipper in the fact she's afraid of growing up while Dipper's racing towards being an adult, and this difference nearly tears the twins apart. But ultimately, they get through it by having each other's backs. Over Gravity Falls, their bond grows extremely strong, so Dipper turns down Ford's offer. For Mabel, knowing that Dipper will be there as she grows up makes it easier for her to accept the fact that we all have to grow up, and Dipper decides he needs to slow down and do the things that are important, and chooses to stick with Mabel and go through high school, instead choosing his young adult life instead of rushing into adulthood. This bond applies to the whole crew of the show. Dipper and Mabel grow extremely close with their friends and family over Gravity Falls. Another great example of this is when Mabel risks letting Stan open the portal because she trusts him. The portal could have been a doomsday device, but Mabel chooses to trust Grunkle Stan instead of stopping him. I covered this extensively in my top 10 most impactful animated moments video. But anyway, overall, Gravity Falls has a lot of character arcs, but they're a lot subtler than Owl House's and Amphibia's. Those shows have their character development front and center, so I'll give Dipper and Mabel a slightly lower score in terms of character arcs, giving them a 7 out of 10. Actions. For actions, I'll skip ahead in Gravity Falls. Dipper and Mabel are both sent to Gravity Falls by their parents, so they didn't really choose to do that. Then, Dipper finding the journal is an accident, so he didn't really choose to do this either. And again, to save time, I won't cover every action they do. In Season 1, there's lots of moments where Dipper and Mabel decide to hunt a monster or pursue a mystery, so let's just cover the big ones. In Episode 9, The Time Traveler's Pig has Dipper and Mabel pinching a time machine so Dipper can redo his day to impress Wendy. When he finally cracks the code on how to win over Wendy, it comes at a terrible cost. Mabel doesn't win her new pet pig, Waddles. Dipper has to choose Wendy or Mabel. Obviously, Dipper takes the L and lets Mabel win Waddles, a very selfless action. We have a similar reverse situation with Mabel in Season 2, Episode 4, Sock Opera. Dipper gets possessed by Bill, and Mabel has to choose Dipper or finishing her sock opera to win the heart of her current crush. Obviously, she saves Dipper, and in the most dramatic way possible. Going back to Season 1, Episode 20, we have the big fight with Gideon. Gideon has taken the Mystery Shack, the journal, and their time in Gravity Falls. Dipper feels powerless without the journal. He starts to believe all his past victories are because of the journal, but Mabel is in trouble. And at first, it looks like Dipper has given up, but then he suddenly leaps into action, taking on Gideon's giant robot. This action is important because Dipper is choosing to believe in himself. It's not just the journal, he can save the day himself. One of the most important actions in Gravity Falls falls on Mabel. In probably the biggest episode in Gravity Falls, Not What He Seems, the Pine twins discover that their great uncle isn't everything that he seems. He has big secrets, and potentially dangerous ones. The FBI suspects he is building a doomsday device, and as far as Dipper and Mabel can tell, he is. All the evidence points to it. Again, I've gone into a lot more detail in my previous video, but this is one of the most tense, heartbreaking moments in the whole show. Mabel is the only one who can turn off the mysterious device. Dipper is screaming at Mabel to turn off the device. Mabel knows it's the right thing to do, since the device could potentially end the world. But Grunkle Stan begs her, explaining that everything he's doing is for this family. And in the biggest leap of faith, she trusts Grunkle Stan, putting everyone's life in his hands. Over the show, we have seen Grunkle Stan bond with Dipper and Mabel, so we want to trust him. This choice affects the direction the show would go. Without this choice, we wouldn't have got Grunkle Ford, or even potentially Weirdmageddon, at least not right away. Bill would still be working his way into our world. Without Ford, Bill definitely wouldn't have been defeated, and who knows what would have happened then. Our next major decision again falls on Mabel. It seems small, but it has drastic consequences. Mabel hears about Dipper's offer to be Ford's apprentice and freaks out running into the woods, where she finds Blendon, the time traveler. He offers Mabel a deal if she gives Blendon the rift, which at this point she doesn't know what it does. Blendon can make her summer last forever. But unknown to Mabel, Bill is taking control of Blendon and uses the rift to unleash Weirdmageddon. So despite seeming small, Mabel's decision nearly causes the end of Gravity Falls and the world. And the potential end of the world requires a lot of hard choices and actions to prevent it. Dipper decides he needs to find Mabel. He goes on a quest to break her out of a magic bubble, but Dipper finds that Mabel doesn't want to leave. But Dipper goes to a fantasy trial to try and convince Mabel to come back to reality. This is where Dipper tells Mabel he will pass up on the offer from Ford. It's a pretty big sacrifice, but also not. It would have jeopardized their relationship, so Dipper ultimately chooses Mabel. And without Mabel, Dipper wouldn't have been able to rally the town to fight against Bill. Speaking of the fight against Bill, Dipper and Mabel lead an assault against Bill, converting the Mystery Shack into a giant robot. Although, I have a lot of questions on how does the dinosaur arm work? This attack saves Great Uncle Ford, which allows them to start the ritual to defeat Bill. But unfortunately, Grunkle Stan and Ford get into a fight, allowing Bill to get one up on them. Dipper and Mabel decide to take on Bill themselves. It's basically a suicide mission. This naive, brave action finally unites Grunkle Stan and Ford. The fear of losing the kids finally allows them to ignore their differences and self-reflect and work together. Also, seeing how bonded Dipper and Mabel are helps them to realize they could be like that again. And without this realization, Bill would have won. Dipper and Mabel have lots of big actions that have drastic consequences they choose wrong. Gravity Falls has one of the coolest ongoing plots in animated series, and it's really driven by the Mystery Twins. I love how intertwined their actions are. They reflect their grunkles. Their grunkles made the wrong choices and split up, but Mabel and Dipper made very positive choices and went in the opposite direction. So I'll be giving their actions a 7 out of 10. So all that leaves us with is their finale. Did Dipper and Mabel have a good ending? Bill is defeated, erased while entering Stan's mind. Weirdmageddon ceases to be, everyone is saved, but at a cost. Dipper and Mabel have lost their Grunkle Stan, or at least the man he was since his memories are gone. It's devastating seeing their reaction to their Grunkle's confused face. But luckily, like Amphibia and Owl House, we can't leave a heroic sacrifice in a sad state. Mabel finds her scrapbook and starts to show Grunkle Stan their past adventures. It's a really sweet family moment for the Pines. It's also a reminder of the past episodes for our audience. And, of course, because of this, Grunkle Stan's memories return. Like the last two shows, we get a bit of a montage showing the town recovering. The town throws a party for the Pines twins to celebrate. But after that, it's time. It's time for Dipper and Mabel to leave Gravity Falls and say their final goodbyes. Each goodbye feels so personal. It really makes you realize how much you care about these characters. Gravity Falls only had 2 seasons, so Amphibia and Sword of Owl House, let's not go into that, get an extra season on Gravity Falls. But even in the shorter time, they made some of the most memorable characters of all time. Well, at least to me. Dipper and Mabel are finally ready to move forward and face the future, no matter what it holds.
Ready to head into the unknown?
Nope. Let's do it.
They're ready for the next part of their lives, and they'll face it together. As the bus is driving off, Dipper gives us a little monologue. It feels as if he's speaking to us, the audience. In a way, it's Gravity Falls saying goodbye to us. It encourages us to seek out our own adventures, and speaks to us as if Gravity Falls is a place we can find, because, really, adventure can be found anywhere. Dipper opens a letter from his friends, saying, "See you next summer." To me, it shows that it's not over for Dipper and Mabel. I'm 100% sure they will return to Gravity Falls, but the speech and the ending lets us know that their arc is over. The show's over. They told the story they wanted to, and now it's time to let Gravity Falls go. It's a very positive ending for Dipper and Mabel, one that promises a bright future full of adventure. Overall, it's nowhere near as dramatic as Amphibia's, but if it was anything like that, I think it would break my heart. I'm glad that our characters aren't separated forever, and Stan has his memories back. The characters of Gravity Falls are just so good that it makes the ending naturally emotional to me. Any show that has you missing its characters has done an amazing job, so I'll give Gravity Falls an 8 out of 10 for its ending. So that gives Dipper and Mabel a total score of 48 out of 60. So where does that put them compared to Luce and Anne? Let's pull up the scoreboard. If you've been keeping track of the score, you know that unfortunately Luce came in last place, scoring a 46. Then Anne came in second place with a 47.5, and of course, in first place is Dipper and Mabel with a total of 48 out of 60. But at the end of the day, the scores don't particularly matter to me. I love all the characters so much. Honestly, I'm constantly switching which ones are my favorite. It was an absolute pleasure getting to cover all these characters in such great detail. So sorry if you don't like the scoring. That's absolutely fair. To be honest, there's so much to these characters that my criteria can't even fully encompass all of the amazing aspects. Speaking of my criteria, let me know what you think of it. I'm not fully happy with it, but I can't think of a better one, so if you have any better ideas, let me know. And if you have any protagonists you want to see ranked, I'm always keen to hear your guys' suggestions. Next, I'll be going back to my villain rankings. I have an unfulfilled promise I must fulfill. And thank you for sticking around this long. This video came out way longer than I expected. My bad, guys. But since you did stick around this long, I'd appreciate it if you considered hitting the subscribe button. I'm nearly at 10k, and that would just be amazing to hit that goal. Anyway, thank you for bearing with me.